Hi team, I'm TJ Banasek with the Microsoft Sentinel product group. I'm joined here today by my colleague Lily Davoudian from the Microsoft Defender for Cloud product group. Today's presentation is on the Azure Security Benchmark version 3 workbook, which is something that you can deploy today from the Microsoft Defender for Cloud product. To get started, let's talk about the wealth of compliance offerings that we have within the Microsoft ecosystem. Common question that we have from customers is Microsoft Defender for Cloud provides compliance as well as Microsoft Sentinel and Compliance Manager. With all of these different tools, how do we tell a consolidated story for meeting compliance requirements across multiple frameworks and hardening our cloud, multi-cloud, on-premise, and hybrid workloads? So the answer we have is using these products together in parallel. No singular product will be able to give you everything that you need for compliance framework. There are so many different dynamics that your teams will need to look at that using each one of these offerings for their strengths is what will provide you with the best picture of the security and posture of your workloads. So we start with Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which is our cloud workload protection platform, cloud security posture management platform. Microsoft Defender for Cloud is deployed to secure your workloads, let you know where you have gaps, weaknesses, or vulnerabilities, and then make recommendations to resolve them, oftentimes with single-click remediations and security orchestration and automation response actions. And so this product does not stand alone as far as what it can do. We always recommend that our customers reference the Microsoft Service Trust Portal, which is where we publicly post our compliance and audit reports. So if you are approaching a framework or a requirement, definitely do use that tool and portal to pull down and understand what do we as Microsoft cover within the CSP model, what do we share with you as the customer, and what are you responsible for as a customer, which is where you'll likely spend the majority of your time. This offering is a better together story between Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Microsoft Sentinel. Microsoft Sentinel is our cloud native SIEM/SOAR, Security Information Event Management platform. We use that to aggregate all of your logs and make security insights and then respond to security incidents with automation and respective capabilities. So it's a very powerful story when you put these two products together. This workbook really highlights the power of using these two offerings together. These are the only recommended or required prerequisites for using this offering, but do note that we're providing visibility across the entire Microsoft ecosystem of 25 plus different products. We're providing coverage across the Microsoft Cloud, Azure, multi-cloud into AWS and GCP, as well as integrating your third-party security tooling, because we understand that security is an ecosystem and we want to include all those investments. This offering provides a workbook, which is a dashboard visualization to help you use a single pane of glass to see all these things in a comprehensive report that you can then print and hand off to respective organizations, regulators, and security leadership. We also have Microsoft 365 Compliance Manager, so is another one of the prerequisites, opening up an assessment for your respective compliance framework, be it NIST, ISO, PCI, DSS, on and so forth. Definitely do open up Compliance Manager. Provides a very powerful tool to collect your artifacts and look at the greatest depth of each one of the controls, as well as our Microsoft recommendations for meeting them. What is the Azure Security Benchmark? ASB is a defined standard of Microsoft best practice, as well as including a conglomerate of 3 of the most recognized compliance frameworks in the security industry: PCI DSS, CIS, and then NIST SP 853. And so we combine those 4 components to provide a framework for hardening your cloud workloads and setting a baseline to measure that. And in order to do that, measuring it provides the ability to mature your model over time. And so that's very important about how this benchmark works, is measuring your security posture and evaluating that story over time. And Lily's going to show you guys in the demo a lot of the ways that we can do this. Keep in mind that this is a technical, a logical-based control. This is a tool that you can deploy today to immediately get an assessment as well as insights into how you can mature your security posture. This is the third iteration of this workbook. We published it for the first time last summer, and we've incrementally supported this as a product group since, because we truly believe in the power of the security benchmark, as well as the feedback and input from our customers and our community as far as how this is really helping them revolutionize and modernize the security of their workloads. So what have we changed in this new version? The first is scale. So we want to ensure that when you're doing this type of work, when you have multiple workspaces in your tenant, your cross-tenant, your multi-cloud, and so on and so forth, we want you to be able to do this at scale. It doesn't make sense to look at a lot of different Defender for Cloud instances or Microsoft Sentinel instances. So we built this for greater scale and tested and proven in customer environments up to 200 plus workspaces simultaneously. So please don't do this in several places. Use this single pane of glass as a powerful tool to help you get those perspectives. We've redesigned the user interface mainly for simplicity and navigation. So you guys will see that as we walk you through the different control cards, summaries, and exportable reports. As far as integration, we've expanded our integration across the Microsoft portfolio. So all of the Microsoft security tools that you know, own, and deploy will be visible within their respective components and areas. And I'll go into a little bit more about how that looks in practice. We've expanded integration into multi-cloud coverage, hybrid and on-premise, as well as third-party integration. Third-party integration was a really important perspective that we wanted to bring in to where when you use this offering, you don't need to change your configurations if you're using a McAfee EPO, a CrowdStrike, a Carbon Black, Semantic Endpoint as maybe your EDR platform. We want you to know that if you've onboarded those offerings to Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Microsoft Sentinel, you will get insights in areas where the controls mention EDR or respective security capabilities. Posture assessment is important, so think of this as your executive summary. So regardless of where your posture is, you will immediately get an assessment of that. We're using the Azure Security Benchmark policies to be able to do that. These policies do change and grow and evolve over time, so we're ensuring that regardless of when you use this, you're going to have the latest and greatest, and it is very well maintained by both our Azure Security Benchmark product group and our groups as well. Controls crosswalk was an area that we had a lot of customer feedback from the community to say, you've got about 75 different controls within this framework. We're using 25 plus different products to help tell that story and show what they're doing for your workloads. We're also crossing that across Microsoft best practice and 3 compliance frameworks. So there's a good deal of information going on in there. And so what we've done is added a controls crosswalk, which allows you to export that mapping into an Excel spreadsheet or CSV file so you can better understand it. We've also embedded it into the workbook to where you can rapidly search for that. So if you're using Azure Key Vault and you want to know which controls address Azure Key Vault, you have a search bar that will put you on those controls to understand what that tool provides you, as well as which control cards and areas of the workbook you can learn more and see that tool in practice. We have the new control areas. The evolution of Azure Security Benchmark from V2 to V3 included 2 to 3 major areas. The first is DevOps security, which is what we do when we're looking at control of code, development, and operations. And so if you're using an Azure DevOps solution, if you're using GitHub or a different CI/CD pipelines, we now have the ability to show you how that security looks, as well as connecting to those repositories with the Microsoft Sentinel connectors, bringing them in, and then assessing that policy as well. We've also expanded certificate management into its own control family to show you what your management of certificates and keys and encryption looks like. That is a very wide area, so we wanted to put additional emphasis and focus on that. The last area that we have is the growing integration between Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Microsoft 365. So we know that customers use all of them together. We wanted to make sure that our integrations were really strong, and especially on the Microsoft Sentinel side, in the connectors that we've deployed and put forward, we're able to get a full story of parity between Microsoft Sentinel and Microsoft 365 Defender. So anything that you can see over there in advanced hunting, you can see in Sentinel, you can see in this workbook as well. So Just having a very deeply integrated experience between all these products is what we're looking to do. We want to be able to save you the time of not having to look across a lot of different tools, just being able to gain those security insights without having to be a subject matter expert or a 400 level user. What are the workbook benefits? The audience that we target is implementers who use this to design and build, assessors, which are your regulators that are going for audit, and they can use this for exportable reports, which often serve as artifacts to support different types of audits, depending on your compliance framework and needs. For security analysts within your security operations center, you can use this to really gain a deeper level of visibility than you've ever seen before, because when we use all those products and put them into one place, you're able to get a very deep and granular understanding of the workloads that you're defending. All of these are based on KQL, our query language. So you can create queries, you can take the ones that you like, you can move around with visibility and really see the art of the possible. When you deploy the workbook, you own the content, meaning you can change anything within it. If you decide to change it, they're very customizable. It's very common for our customers that are using them in production environments. You can also respond, and that's where the power of Defender for Cloud and Microsoft Sentinel together is really a powerful story. Defender for Cloud can tell you when you have a posture issue or a gap or a weakness. Microsoft Sentinel can help you respond to that. It can show you your security incidents to where people are attacking you in those weak spots and respond to that with automation. So if you need to block an account, if you need to prevent an IP address from accessing your workloads, if you need to pull a forensics package off of your endpoint EDR solution, you're able to do this all from this singular interface. And so we're really looking this as more so of an ecosystem. You know, it's not one tool. You might see it through one tool, but you're looking at an entire portfolio of a cloud, multi-cloud, first and third party ecosystem. Reporting and visualizations, the core of the offering is the workbook, which is a dashboard visualization. If you print the entire thing as a report, you could do an executive summary, which is a one-pager, or you can go all the way up into about a 75-pager, depending on what level of depth that you'd like to report on. It's 250 or so different visualizations within these, and you can always add your own and build on this workbook as need be. One of the important things that I wanted to kind of show you guys is the way that we look at a control. We really do want to look at this as measuring configuration drift over time and looking at continuous monitoring. We understand that you may only assess your environment annually or biannually based on your compliance requirements. That's not enough due to how fast that cloud can evolve, change, and grow. And so when we look at a control, there's three major areas that we'll bring to you. The first is your policy. So are you meeting your policy? Yes or no? And if that policy changes, we want to alert you on that and provide the ability to implement a fix, as well as understand the who, what, when, where, and why that a control was changed, especially if it was done insecurely. The second component is the live asset. So it's incredibly powerful to operate cloud native tools because we can look directly into the fabric of the cloud. This is something that bolt-on security products cannot do and will never be able to do. When we use our own fabric, we're able to show you the controls that you have deployed at a fabric level. We also provide deep links. So if you see anything in blue, like we can see in our live assets, the middle panel on the right, that is a DDoS, distributed denial of service control. We can see that we've met the policy for having it for recommendation. We can see that we have a live asset there. When we click on it, if we have the rights to look at it, we have the ability to move into that asset, see the configurations, check the licensing, make sure it's employed to our requirements. Then lastly, the third component of that well-rounded assessment is what does it look like in practice? When you've deployed these tools and you're meeting your policies, you're going to get attacked or you could be attacked. And if you are being attacked, we want to be able to show you what that tool is actively doing to defend your workspace. And when you see those attacks, they're generated as security incidents. You have a deep link to go into Microsoft Sentinel to respond to that. We'll never provide a recommendation without a response option. Some of them are as easy as single clicks. Some of them will take you into full security investigation to understand who's DDoSing me, how are they doing it, where is it coming from, what kind of throughput is coming to my workspace. So that's really the way that we look at these controls is all those different dynamics to provide you the information you need to make valuable assessments in the security of your workloads. Getting started today, we're going to drop the link into the chat for the team. The link at the bottom is the GitHub repo. So if you want to get started today, or maybe you've used a previous version and want to update, go to the README page. You'll notice the blue buttons for deploy to Azure or deploy to Azure Gov. This offering is available in all of our clouds, so you can get started today. And selecting that button will walk you through an automated prompt to lay it down within your Defender for Cloud instance and let you get up and started with it. Next thing I want to show you guys is a use case. How do I use this in practice? Like, it sounds really good, but I want to see how it breaks down piece by piece. And so our use case is distributed denial of service, the examples that I showed you in the previous slide. This is NS.5 within the Azure Security Benchmark v3 framework. The crosswalk will show you how that overlays to your compliance. So if you're doing PCI DSS, if you're doing NIST 853, if you're doing CIS, the crosswalk will show you that within that component. We'll start with analyzing our posture and assessing where we are, and that is the executive summary to show you how you're doing in your policy. And so in the bottom left, we see for network security, looks like we're about 26% of the way there. We've got a lot of policies that we need to address, or at least rationalize or suppress if they're not applicable to our workspace. Once we have that assessment, we want to build and design a control. And so when we do that, we provide you guys with a control card. So the control card provides all the information that you'll need to get started. It will have a document link at the top, which takes you in to explain what this control is and how it overlays to your technology and your requirements. When we show you visualizations, we'll tell you exactly which product provided it, with a deep link to the product page if you want to understand what it is, how it's used, how it's licensed. We show you the telemetry that's used. That's really valuable for analysts that want to understand how do I collect that telemetry? How do I bring it into my workspace? How do I use it for insights? What value does it provide me for monitoring? We have the implementation, so teaching you how to deploy these products and bringing you to our smart cards, our quick starts, our getting started guides, to where if you need to do DDoS, we don't want you to have to get lost in the docs or read up for days and weeks to become an expert. We just want to put you on the most applicable docs page to save you the time and get you started as soon as you can and as easy as possible. When we use the different products, we know it can be kind of challenging for an analyst or an engineer or an architect to move around in these different tools. And so anytime that we reference a tool, you'll have a deep link which will land you on that tool portal blade. So you don't have to look for it or remember where to go. It'll just bring you to the most applicable place within our cloud, to where you can see the configurations of that tool or deploy it for the first time if you're new to using it. That's really covering the build and design phase. Then you want to go into the active security controls. So once you have them deployed, you now have an artifact to say, for DDoS protection, I'm doing it, and I now have a visualization saying that I've got one of these deployed right now. I know where it's deployed, who's using it. And if I want to get more details, I can use that same deep link to look at that asset. And if I have the role-based access control to change that configuration, maybe I'm security admin or network security admin, be able to change that there if I want to adjust the configuration. We also have the monitoring perspective. So if you're being attacked, an attacker is employing a DDoS against you, they would do that to try to knock your workloads offline to where you and your customers can't use them, or your users. And so if you are being DDoS, like we are in this example, we want to show you that, so you know that you have a tool, your policy is met, it's used in practice, and is now defending you. And so if you want to investigate these, the deep links will take you into Microsoft Sentinel security incidents and allow you to respond to these as well. So the tool does a lot on its own, but if you want to build on that with a security investigation, get more information, put more controls in place, and remediate that to the fullest, that integration with security incidents is incredibly powerful. Lastly, we want you to be able to respond. So responding is different depending on the incident response model that you may be using. And so when you're being attacked, you want to respond to that, remediate it, and then look at lessons learned. So once the incident is fully remediated, you need to think about how you can change your security architecture to ensure that anytime that you get hit, you get stronger, and it's harder for the attacker to hit you with that same technique in the future. And so that's where the power of Defender for Cloud comes in, to evaluate your policy, to give you single-click deployments, to harden your workload, to implement security measures, to make sure sure that if you have a gap, you have a solution and a way to fix that rapidly. Next, I want to turn it over to my colleague Lily for demonstration of the offering.
Awesome, thank you, Jay. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Let me know when everyone can see.
We can see it.
I'm going to trust everyone can see it. Awesome, thank you. Thanks for the introduction, TJ. That was a really, really helpful kind of overview of the solution and a great starting point for us. So I've been following along in the Q&A, and I know there are a lot of specific features that TJ talked about that everyone is interested in seeing. So I'm going to jump through that. As always, like, please continue to ask questions in the chat, and we'll either address them in the demo or afterwards. So love to see that kind of engagement there. So as TJ mentioned, this workbook is really around building awareness and visibility into your security posture based on Azure Security Benchmark. And Azure Security Benchmark is our best practices mapped to NIST and to CIS, and we're seeing really great customer adoption and wanted to build this to really help customers accelerate their security stories with our products. So Azure Security Benchmark, this workbook lives in Defender for Cloud. I know that we also have workbooks in Sentinel and want to be clear about where you can find this after you've deployed it from the GitHub link that I shared in the chat. If it's your first time in the workbook, I would recommend enabling the Getting Started blade. This is a great place just to better understand some of the prerequisites and how to get up and running really quickly. If there are things that you're not familiar with, like maybe enabling continuous export of your security recommendations to Sentinel or any kind of auto provisioning of agents, we link directly to all of our docs pages that will do a very step-by-step, easy to follow run through there. So again, if it's your first time, I would really recommend reading this, following the instructions, and making sure that you're setting yourself up for success. As TJ mentioned, we know that a lot of customers are in multiple tenants and they want to have that single pane of glass visibility. For us, being able to monitor your entire environment, regardless of where it lives, is incredibly important. This is a huge piece of feedback that we've gotten from customers. So to that end, we have a really awesome integration here with Azure Lighthouse. So you can jump in, enable the Yes blade here, and you'll be able to see all of the tenants either that you have delegated to or that you have permissions on. And it's a really great way to be able to view your posture, not only for the tenant that you're in, but anywhere that you have rights, so that you can see that story across your entire ecosystem. In addition to the multi-tenant view, we also want to make this customizable so you can think about some of your subscriptions or all of them at once. Similar filters for workspace and time. We've built something that's a really great framework and really great starting point, but we've also enabled a lot of customization. And all of this, it's a workbook that's built in Kusto or KQL query. So any filter that you add will automatically adjust on all of the panels, super easy in one click, and you can come in and look at your data across whatever scope is most relevant to you. In addition to these kind of getting started blades, I also would recommend checking out some blogs and video demos that we've done in the past. In addition to what we're sharing now, this will just give more insights for those looking to enable this. So the first place I want to start is the executive summary, and this is what gives you that really high level visibility into your security posture aligned to the Azure Security Benchmark. So as TJ mentioned, Azure Security Benchmark is our Microsoft authored set of best practices for securing your workloads in the cloud. We stream all of those insights and that really rich telemetry continuously into Sentinel to do this analysis. So what's really great about this executive summary is that we have mapped it to the Azure Security Benchmark control families, but we've added a lot of other ways to be able to view, visualize, and act on this data. So here, if we just look at the breakdown by control family, you can come in and kind of easily think about where you may need to prioritize if it's your first time here. So maybe we see that network security has a bit of a lower percentage of past controls, and we want to filter on that. So here we can add a filter with one click for network security, and that will adjust all of the panels below. So let's give that a second to load. So here we see we're only looking at the network security control family, and we can look at all of the recommendations within that control family and kind of understand where we might want to focus our time. So here the first recommendation that we see is around storage accounts and how public access should be disallowed. If we have a look at this, we see that we have about 50 unhealthy storage accounts that need to be remediated. If we decide that this is something we want to action immediately to help harden and secure our environment, all we need to do is hit the remediate button. All of this is staying in the workbook, but tapping into the Defender for Cloud recommendations. So here we can have one click, select all of these unhealthy resources and fix it directly, or we can trigger a logic app and notify the relevant teams via email or via Teams chat to ask them to correct this misconfiguration. So that's awesome. And maybe if there's a reason that you're not adhering to this recommendation, you can use policy to exempt it. Or if we see that this is a really prevalent recommendation over time and you want to build in guardrails, we also have the option to use Azure policy here, which would basically enforce this by making sure that when you create new storage accounts, by default, they are secure. So navigating here, we have a lot of different options on how to remediate and how to fix this control. So jumping back, as you saw, that was all in one pane of glass. You don't need to authenticate. You don't need to go to a new portal. We show you the visibility of how to, where you may have a misconfiguration in your environment, as well as how to fix it, all within clicks. So that's really awesome. As always, you can always slice the data however you want. You can filter by healthy, by unhealthy, by recommendation name. You can even search here. If you're interested, you can open this data in Azure Resource Graph. So all of this is really helpful. Someone made a comment in the chat about how can I export this to Excel. And so that's what you would do here. You have the option to, again, one easy click, you can export this data to Excel, open it. You can share it with members of your security or governance team. You can share it with auditors. So a lot of different options, and you'll see that here. Let's slow down on my computer quite a bit, but you see that here. Scrolling down, we also have other pivots on this data. So if you want, you can look at maybe your assets that are most vulnerable that you might need to work on. You can look at different slices of the data, again, by asset, and then you can pivot directly into the asset, again, with one click without additional authentication, and you can make the changes at that level if you prefer. Because this is based on that telemetry and that rich Sentinel integration, we see a really great story over time. So a big thing to think about is the difference between viewing this in the regulatory compliance blade and viewing this in the workbook. And when you see it here, you see the story over time, which helps you think about where do I need to build in guardrails and make sure that new resources are secure by default. Because at the end of the day, what we see with our customers is that they are constantly deploying new resources, one of the big advantages of working in the cloud space, but we also want to make sure that those resources are secure by default and that we have guardrails here. So how can we use this overtime story to understand where we may need to use policy, where we may need to use automation to make sure that we're not chasing these recommendations. The other thing that I want to add for our Secure Score friends is that Azure Security Benchmark is also the basis of the Secure Score. So as you fix recommendations here, you will see your Secure Score increase as well. Another thing that I want to add is how you can export this data beyond just to Excel. So someone had a question in the chat on, do you have a similar print to PDF view like the really great one that we have in Defender for Cloud? And we do. So here, in these ellipses, you can hit print content, and it prints in a really great, easy to read, easy to share, digest format. I would recommend going off dark mode when you print it, just to save your printer a little bit. But as you can see, it all fits perfectly on the page and shares kind of all of that data out that you can share with your security teams. You can use to build into your roadmap. You can share with your auditors. So a lot of really great use cases from that feature as well. So that's the executive summary. The controls crosswalk is really how we show our alignment to other regulatory compliance initiatives. So Azure Security Benchmark, as TJ mentioned, is mapped to NIST and to CIS. And throughout the controls, the control cards, I'll kind of show how we highlight that. But here we've brought it together in one place. So we've taken the different controls and show how they map not only to NIST and to CIS, but also to PCI. These are three big initiatives that we see across industries that customers are asking to better understand how they can align to and how they can agree on. And so we've done that here. We also show you what Microsoft products might be relevant to help you meet that control name. So really helpful mapping here. And again, if you're interested in any of these initiatives, would recommend checking out this alignment, especially things like NIST. We see customers in and out of the US government space using as a framework and a starting point. So this is a helpful crosswalk between those frameworks depending on what your organization is interested in. So the remaining selectors down here align to the different control areas in Azure Security Benchmark. And I'm going to use the rest of the time to really walk through what those control cards look like and how you can use them to harden your posture. So to start, let's hit the first one, which is network security. As you can see, we have a lot of different subcontrols here. Each subcontrol has their own control card. So there are hundreds of control cards or visualizations within this workbook. I saw a lot of chatter in the chat around DDoS, so let's pick that one since that seems to be top of mind for folks today. So everything that you see here is clickable. We at Microsoft recognize that we produce a lot of really great links, a lot of great documentation, a lot of portals, and sometimes it can be difficult to keep track of that. And so we try to do that here by really deep linking everything. So at the top where you have deploy DDoS protection, we link you directly to the Azure Security Benchmark documentation that talks about that control. So you can read more if it's something that you're not familiar with. You also see that alignment here to NIST, CIS, and PCI. So here we tell you a little bit about kind of what this subcontrol is referring to and the Azure Security Benchmark recommendations that align to it. So here you can see that I do have the DDoS protection plan, so I'm in pretty good shape there, and you can actually see that down here, which is awesome. We've also put in recommended logs as well as the products that those log sources come from for further investigation. If you maybe have more red here than green and you need to enable that kind of protection, the DDoS protection, we also walk you through how to do that exact implementation. And then finally, as I mentioned, we have a lot of portals. So anywhere that we talk about a product and a product portal, we will always link you there so you can navigate directly. Here you can see that I have the DDoS plan and I've implemented it and I've marked that accordingly. If I want to put in further notes for an auditor, I can add in the date and I can even just free text type in notes here and then save them. So I have that handy too. So here, if I scroll down, in addition to being able to see the recommendations, my DDoS plan, I can also see all of my security incidents. And again, this is due to that really, really tight and rich integration that we have with Microsoft Sentinel. So here I see that there are a bunch of DDoS attacks with high severity. If I hit this incident link, again, it's taking me directly into Sentinel. It's taking me there without further authentication based on that awesome Azure AD RBAC that we have. So let's see what happens when I go to entities and try and kind of further investigate this alert. So here I can hit the investigate option. Takes me to this mapping. After I saw kind of that IP, if I want to look further, I can maybe block that IP with a playbook, just as a kind of quick fix option to try to better secure my environment. So let's see if we have a playbook for that. Yeah, awesome, and we do. So the benefit of the integration that we see here with Sentinel is the fact that we can take not only the recommendation that's telling us what we need to do and how through the Azure Security Benchmark recommendation, but we can also see the end-to-end story where we might have attempts to compromise our system. How can we respond and do all of that from a single pane of glass or a single workbook? So jumping back to the workbook, as you can see, we can do all of that very easily without additional navigation across portals or authentication there. So if I click out of the network security control and maybe we look at another one, let's look at identity management, which is next on the list. Again, here we see all of the sub-controls. So picking the first one, you may need to move some things around to be able to see everything. You'll see another control card very similar to the one I just showed. So here we're able again to link back to the Azure Security Benchmark docs pages. It takes us directly to that sub-control with the alignment to CIS, to NIST, to PCI. If you're jumping in for the first time, you can read this just to have a review of what this control sub-control is asking for and for some additional context here. Again, we have the recommended logs and the products that they align to. Here we reference Defender for Cloud and Azure AD, so we've made sure to link you to the portals there. And again, we walk through the implementation. So we talk about how to define Azure AD tenants, how to configure these instances, and all of that directly in the control card so that you can navigate there if this is something that you're not familiar with. We also have aligned the Azure Security Benchmark recommendation. So again, this is a place that I'm doing fairly well. If I see there's maybe a SQL server that doesn't have an Azure AD admin provisioned and I want to jump in and do that, I can do that from this pane of glass through the remediation like I showed earlier. So that's the control card that we've seen. And then here, through the Azure AD logs, I can have a look at all of the users and their valid accounts. So I can have a look at their Azure Active Directory profiles and kind of learn more here about their pattern of life, who they are, what their devices are, where they're accessing from. So if we pick one of our demo users here and have a bit of an investigation, it gives us more context when we're doing the incident review. So let's say we have a user and they have like Kali Linux or some kind of software on their computer that doesn't quite make sense. Having these insights into what kind of user they are they a member of the red team? Are they a member of the sales team? Makes a huge difference when we think about their identity and how it's being used. So this is a great source of just contextual data for your investigators who can really help have a better understanding of kind of the motive and purpose behind some of the actions that we see and make it a bit more contextualized for investigation. So we have similar data for all of the users in our environment and can have a look at that as we try and understand incidents and use that rich integration again that we have with Microsoft Sentinel. And then the last thing I want to show, since we're talking about incidents and we've seen some of the view on how to use Sentinel here, is our incident response control area. So here, again, if you scroll down, you can see that the control area is referring to incident management and how we can make sure that we are responding to and addressing incidents that we may see in our environment. Here we can see all of the controls that align to this area. So we can.
The one right.
Yeah, hold on one second. I've selected two. So let me just close in on this. So here we can see all of the controls that align to incident response, and there are a bunch of different ones that we can investigate when we think about some of our Defender for Cloud capabilities. If we want to use Defender for Cloud to investigate an incident and meet that control, we can have a look at the control card and see what the recommendations are. We can also create incidents based in alerting, which is really helpful when we think about Defender for Cloud, since we get a lot of rich alerts from all of our Defender plans. So here you can see the integration with the Defender plan. So it's asking to enable Defender for Key Vault, Defender for SQL, all of these different resource types that we cover and that we provide alerts on. If you don't have that enabled, we can remediate that again directly in the portal here, which is a huge benefit. Those those plans do create alerts when we see attempts to compromise your system, and we can surface those in Defender for Cloud and then stream them here. Again, if that's something that you do not have enabled, we walk you through all of that in the implementation. We also share the links to the relevant portals as usual. So having the ability to feed those incidents to a singular place is where Sentinel comes in. And here, if you scroll down, we've linked our security incidents here. One that we see pretty frequently is impossible travel, and this one is actually leading to ransomware. If I extend this out a bit more, we can see it. So very similar to what we've done previously, we can click the incident blade, pivot directly to Sentinel, and try and learn more. So we're not only getting that visibility into what's happened, but we're also getting the opportunity to respond and to investigate further. So here we're in the high level overview. We can look at the alerts that were triggered and what products they came from, and we can also have a look at the entities impacted. So here we see both the account and the IP. So if we want to investigate further, we can hit the investigate tab on the bottom left and have a look both at the impossible travel and at the ransomware activity that occurred. So here we can get a quick description, our confidence level, the severity, and more information here. If there is impossible travel and we want to maybe block that user while we figure out what's going on, we do have playbooks to that, similar to the one I showed earlier. So let's say that we want to take some time to investigate this further, and maybe while we're doing that, we'd like to block Jeff. We can search for a playbook to just block the user. And we can do that again, all from one pane of glass without leaving the workbook, and be able to confidently try and kind of remediate some of our risk here. And then here we also see that not only was Jeff doing some impossible travel, but we also see ransomware activity from his device. So we can also run a playbook there. Maybe we want to go beyond just blocking the user. All of this can be done directly in Microsoft Sentinel. So let's jump back to the workbook. That's just a few of our control areas. We have one control area per ASP control family, so would recommend checking them all out. Having a look through the workbook, we've made a lot of changes, as TJ mentioned, around not only product enrichments and changes to Azure Security Benchmark, but really based off of customer feedback, what teams are using, what they like, opportunities for growth. And so we're really excited to have been able to release this and to continue to get those great insights from this group. So thank you for having us and for letting us walk through the solution. Hopefully we've addressed some of the questions, but I'll pass it back to the team to close out, and we'll save some time at the end to answer any other questions. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we do have a few questions. Let's see. So the first one would be, is there a documented way to publish a Defender workbook to Power BI?
Great question. I can answer that one because I spend a lot of time in Power BI. There are a lot of ways to bring this telemetry into Power BI, and we've actually done that before just based on the audience. And sometimes we find that maybe you want to share this with a decision maker or somehow build it into your roadmap, and you don't want them accessing your Defender for Cloud instance. I will drop a link in the chat, but you can easily take the queries that are relevant to you and bring those into Power BI and do additional visualizations and reporting there.
So there's a few things that I really like about this use case, and I love the question because we've seen this in practice from a lot of our customers. When you have someone that isn't a Defender for Cloud user or isn't a Microsoft Sentinel user, as Lily said, they might not have access to those tools. Power BI provides a really powerful extension of this content, and it's more shareable without bringing folks into your tools if they either don't have access or maybe don't have the rights to be in there. And so when I was a Security Operations Center manager, we were using this integration in practice. And the reason I really liked it is I'd get calls at 2 in the morning to say, there's WannaCry ransomware crawling through your network right now. And when you get that call at 2 in the morning, I mean, it's not what you want to hear, but you do want to get a valuable idea with what's happening. Power BI has a mobile app, so I was able to pull that up on my phone and get this type of visibility without having to run downstairs at 2 a.m. to get my computer. So that's really how you evolve technology to enable decision making. So we really do like that and really appreciate the question and perspectives there.
Great. The next one is, what are the expected detection time for alerts or vulnerabilities?
What are the expected detection times? I'm not sure I understand the question. Like, what's the time for the integration with the workbook?
Well, we'll wait for them to elaborate. I'll move on to the next question.
I can take that from a few different perspectives. So it's always going to depend on your reporting platform. And so there's a lot of vulnerability management integrations with Microsoft Defender for Cloud. You could be using Qualys built in. You could be using the Defender for Cloud vulnerability recommendations, or you could be using the Defender for Endpoint recommendations. So all of them are going to be dependent on the respective capability and monitoring thresholds for how frequently those scans run. And so some of them are as fast as 15 minutes. Some of them are configured to run daily or weekly. So it really depends on the policies and vulnerabilities that you're monitoring. On the other perspective, from the Sentinel side, the security alerting is also going to be dependent on the reporting platform. So Microsoft Sentinel is capable of doing sub 5 minutes in near real-time detections if you have that configured. If you're maybe using an integration with a third-party product like a CrowdStrike Falcon, you're going to be dependent on that tool's detection timeline plus ingestion with Sentinel. And that isn't a uniform thing because that integration right there depends on how you have it configured. Is it a direct integration via connector? Does it have to go to a logging platform? There's a lot that you need to look at. My recommendation in those areas is decide your business need within your security incident response plan. If you say a ransomware incident requires a 15-minute SLA, you should be thinking about reporting timelines and calculating to keep you within 15 minutes or less to provide you that response time to ensure that you're defending your business as needed. So definitely check that out. Look at the different capabilities. We can provide some documentation, but I kind of want to know more about your architecture to make sure that we're aligning with your needs.
I also want to answer a question in the chat that I think is really important, which is the customer is saying that they have a multi-cloud environment and want to know if this fits their needs. And it does. And I want to address it from two angles. So first, we have the Azure Security Benchmark, which we initially authored as a Microsoft set of best practices for customers in Azure per the name. But this, in the last few months, we've released really, really amazing multi-cloud capabilities for that, whereby we can protect your assets whether or not they're in Azure. So for your AWS and GCP resources, we have alignment with our recommendations. And so from that angle, we are covering your multi-cloud environment. And then for the workbook specifically, we allow you to bring in your third party and your on-prem tooling and to see all of that from one pane of glass. So definitely cover multi-cloud. We recognize that most customers are in that multi-cloud mode and want to be able to have that single visibility across your entire ecosystem through this workbook and through our products.
I'd really say that if you guys like what you're seeing here with multi-cloud, note that this is the third version of the Azure Security Benchmark. Stay tuned, and you guys are gonna like what you see.
Great, thank you. The next question we have is, how do these workflows work with / integrate with Cloud App Security Portal and Security Portal and AAD risky users, or does these replace them?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this isn't ever going to be a replacement. Think of this as a single pane over your existing investments. And so if we're looking in one of the control families for identity management, there are areas to where it talks about risky user access, and you will basically see AAD risky user within your P2 SKUs populating those panels to show you those controls. When there's an incident generated from that, there'll be a deep link to move over to AAD risky users to have a look at who's risky and why. And so I always call this basically a starting point to give visibility at a very wide perspective. When your tools are reporting like AAD risky user or Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, there's a deep link. You're going to have to pivot into those as the expert systems to remediate and investigate further.
Great. The next question is, Why deep link pivots to Sentinel? What's in Sentinel but not in Defender for Cloud?
Yeah. So Defender for Cloud provides policy-based assessments based in recommendations. Microsoft Sentinel does not. And when Defender for Cloud makes a recommendation, it provides fixes for that, quick fixes, remediations, implementation, vulnerability management. Sentinel does very well with security incidents, aggregating security alerts from multiple platforms within Azure, within Microsoft, within third party, within multi-cloud. So when you complement those two capabilities together, you say, look at an asset being attacked. Sentinel does a very good job of telling you you're being attacked. Defender for Cloud can tell you you're being attacked in a vulnerable asset. So as you respond to that with Sentinel, you can implement remediations within Defender for Cloud to adjust your policy, change your configuration. So the two work really well together. You know, I would always recommend using the two together because they complement each other.
Great, thank you. The next question is, does this workbook require Microsoft Defender for Cloud plans to be enabled? Also, does Sentinel need to be configured and operational for your entire environment?
Yeah, great question. So it does not require the Advanced Defender plans. The Azure Security Benchmark is covered without cost, and you'll see that within your Regulatory Compliance Initiative blade. And so it is not coming at additional cost. The workbook is not coming at additional cost. You can deploy that and get started today. It will provide recommendations that you use those Defender plans, but it won't be a requirement for you to use the content. For Microsoft Sentinel, you don't need to have it everywhere. Of course, we'd recommend that you have it everywhere, but that's based in your architecture. And so there is a getting started prerequisite for continuous export. And what you do is you point the Defender for Cloud to export the logs into Sentinel. And so both of them are recommended to be sitting on the same log analytics workspace. And that's where you're getting that synergy. And so you would decide which Sentinel instance that you point it to. And if your Sentinel instance is maybe using Lighthouse at scale, you could use that as an aggregation point. That's really valuable to make sure that you don't duplicate the logs. If you're using external tools and platforms, they're going to make you export and duplicate the logs. If you're using it internally within Microsoft, you won't. You're getting the power of using your logs without duplication or paying twice for them.
Great, thank you. And we have time for one more question. This one is, to do auto remediation, update policy, etc. from within the workbook, what roles are you assuming the user of the workbook has?
Yeah. This is great as well. You'll notice in the top left of the workbook, there's a getting started or a helper pane. When you select that, it pulls down to talk about, oh, thank you, Lily, to talk about the RBAC, role-based access that you would need. So if you deploy a regulatory compliance initiative for the first time, you're going to need to have owner rights to do it. The Azure Security Benchmark is built in, so you won't need it there. If you need to change an asset, you're going to need to be a security contributor or a security admin. That's only going to be on your security tools. If you pivot into an identity platform like Azure Active Directory, it's going to respect the RBAC that you have. So it's not going to allow you to change anything that you don't already have the rights for, because we're bound to your identity in Azure Active Directory. Once it's deployed, Security Reader is enough to view the workbook, to print it, but the experience is different for everybody. Lily and I have different rights and roles within our demo tenant. We each will see a different perspective based on what we're allowed to see and what we're allowed to change.
Great. Thank you so much, TJ and Lily, for being our guests today and for an excellent presentation. And thank you to the rest of the team who helped answer questions. At the same time, I would like to remind the listeners that the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements is to visit our landing page at aka.ms/securitycommunity. And while there, you'll find easy ways to navigate and find the resources and learning content relevant to our security products and their communities. A good start would be browsing our bite-sized product videos, ninja trainings, recordings of past webinars, GitHub communities, and more. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars. Please take a minute submitting your webinar feedback at aka.ms/security-webinar-feedback. Thank you, and see you next time. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, team.